Donald Trump's reelection may largely be based on how well the U.S. economy continues to roll along. And economic numbers are good. But is the economy working for everybody? And what impact might a lingering trade war with China have on Trump's reelection? We'll talk about that and other things with Stephen Moore, distinguished visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He served as economic advisor to the 2016 Trump campaign. Of late, he is the co-founder and chief economic officer of Fracks. And we'll find out about Fracks in a little while. Do you agree that the rich are doing a lot better than the poor?
The rich are doing.
They always done.
Well, the rich are doing just fine, no question about that. We've got a booming stock market. We've got, we've got the Bill Gates of the world and the founders of Google and Facebook, and we have these incredibly great companies that have made billions and billions of dollars and are have valuations of nearly. Did you ever think we'd have a company that would be valued at $1 trillion? No. Well, we have a couple of them now with Apple and Google. So yeah, the rich are doing fine. What I care about is how is the middle class doing? How are the people in the middle? How is everyone doing? And what we hope to do under Trump was do what John F. Kennedy always talked about, which was create what he used to call a rising tide that would lift all boats. I think we're succeeding in that, Larry. I mean, I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago that showed that average incomes for, I'm not talking about, Gates and Zuckerberg and LeBron James and Tom Brady. I'm talking about middle-class people. Their incomes have risen $5,003 since Trump took office. That's a pretty nice gain in a fairly short period of time. So, yeah, we feel good about where people are in their family finances now.
Would you call his presidency thus far a success?
Well, certainly on the economy I would. I mean, my goodness, think about this, Larry. I mean, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We've got the lowest inflation rate in 50 years. We've got the lowest interest rates in 50 years. We've got the fastest wage gains in 25 years. We've got the stock market that's up 50%. It's hard to point to much that isn't working. Would I like to see faster economic growth? Yeah. So I'm going to give him an A- so far in terms of his handling of the economy. And you see this in a lot of the, if you ask the American people, how do you rate the economy? Prior to Trump's election, it was, 30 to 40% rated the economy is good or great. Now it's 60 to 70%. So things seem to be working on the economy.
You also called him an exaggerator and says a lot of things that are untrue.
So Donald Trump does exaggerate. So I was asked the question, is Donald Trump a liar? And I said, no, Donald Trump doesn't lie. He does exaggerate. I mean, as an example, the question that you're referring to was, Donald Trump said we were going to get 5% economic growth. And I said, well, look, we knew 5% was a stretch. It'd be very difficult to get 5%. But Larry Kudlow and I and Art Laffer and some of the others, we certainly thought we could get to 3 to 4%. But, he said we're going to get to 5%. Now, that's aspirational. I don't think it's a problem. But people are going to have to make up their own mind about the things that Donald Trump says. I always say judge Donald Trump by his record, not by his rhetoric.
You said he'll be hard to beat in 2020.
I think so. I do. Now, look, we've got an impeachment. I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. Obviously, there are things that could go wrong. And by the way, a year is a lifetime in politics. You may remember that when Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter, Reagan asked that question in the debate in front of the American people: are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And it turned out people didn't feel they were better off 4 years ago, and Reagan won a big election. I think that's the question Trump will ask the American people: are you better off than 4 years ago? And I think most people will say, I don't really. There are a lot of people who don't approve of Donald Trump, but like their financial situation and the way the job situation is. So I do think he will win because people do feel the economy is not the only issue, but it is a prime issue for most voters.
No matter who the Democratic nominee is?
Well, it matters a lot who the Democratic nominee is. I think frankly, I'm not too impressed with the people on the stage right now. And I've been saying for months, Larry, that I think someone else is going to get in this race, whether that's Michael Bloomberg or, somebody who would worry me, frankly, would be Michelle Obama. I think she'd be very difficult for Donald Trump. I don't see Trump having a big problem with, the people who are kind of the front runners right now. I think they're kind of C- candidates. So, yeah, but if it's Elizabeth Warren or, or if the Bernie Sanders, I just don't think the country is ready for the kind of far left-wing redistribution policies they're talking about.
In late June, you told CNBC that even if the United States and China come to agreements, they'll be fighting over trade for 10 or 15 years. You call it the epic battle of our times. Who started it?
They did. They did. You know, China's situation is really interesting. I mean, you know, after Mao died and they moved more towards private enterprise and privatization and liberated their economy, they grew like gangbusters. It was one of the great stories of human history. I mean, they moved 500 million people out of poverty by moving towards a more market-based economy. But Larry, something happened 6 or 7 or 8 years ago in China where their march towards freedom has reversed. And you see what's happening in Hong Kong right now. You see the political dissidents that are put in jail. You're seeing there's no religious freedom in China. It's a sad situation. The way I put it is the Politburo has taken charge back in Beijing. That's not a healthy situation. We've been engaged in an abusive trade relationship with China for the last 25 years. Now look, it didn't matter that much when we were 3 times bigger than they were in terms of our economy. But they're now a mature, developed economy, and the rules have to change. We cannot continue with a relationship where we've opened up our markets to them, but they still have not opened up their markets to us.
All right, Stephen Moore, what is Frax?
So Frax is a cryptocurrency. This is an alternative currency to government monopoly currency. This is, I think, Larry, I'm so glad you're covering this because this is really kind of the next big thing in technology. You know, I do think this is kind of the new internet where you're going to see people, instead of the government controlling currencies, and there will still obviously always be a dollar and there will always be a euro and a yen and a yuan, but now you'll have private companies that have currencies that compete with government currencies, and I think that's a healthy thing, by the way.
Can you explain it simply?
It's basically the idea that you will have a currency, that you will have an account, just like you would have a bank account with dollars, but this would be, in this case, this would be Fracks. That's what we call our tokens. And they would be, in our case, that token would be pegged to the dollar. So, you know, one Fracks would be equal to $1. But what I think people will find appealing about this is, number one, it breaks the government monopoly on currencies. Number two, now the transactions that you make, you know, because more and more of the transactions in the 21st century will be over the internet and things like that, it will not be traceable by government. And now people say, oh my gosh, that means, you know, you're going to have drug runners and criminals and tax cheats using, you know, this alternative currency. And my view is, look, 99.9% of the people who want to use these kind of alternative currencies are not criminals. They just want financial privacy. They don't want the government knowing about every decision they make.
If we have a Frax system,
Yep.
will I still write checks?
Good question. It depends. If you're a Frax user, you will not have to write checks. You'll just, with the click of a button, transfer money from your Frax account to Amazon or, you know, Federal Express or.
And Amazon will take Frax.
We believe they will. We believe once the currency becomes established. I mean, this is still the Wild West right now in currency, right? This is, nobody knows. Just like, remember when the internet started, you didn't know whether it was going to be AOL or this company or that company that was going to emerge. But it's really exciting, and I think this will also facilitate. You know, for example, if you use a credit card for a transaction, you pay a fee. You know, it can be 3 or 4 cents on every dollar. One of the things that these cryptocurrencies like Frax will do is basically reduce those transactional costs to, you know, practically zero. So it will save money for consumers as well.
When will it emerge?
Probably, I mean, for example, our technology will probably emerge in the next year or so, but I think it's going to take 3 or 4 years for these things to really. There's something out there already called Bitcoin, which I'm sure you've heard of. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, but people buy that more as an investment. They think that it's going to go up in value, and if you follow Bitcoin, it goes up and down in value. We don't want that. We want this to be, you know, why do you have a currency? A currency, one of its goals is to retain its value. That's the reason I have dollars in my pocket, and you do, because we know the dollars will be worth something, in the future. But also, you want it to be a means of exchange. And if you've got a currency that's bouncing up and down in price, then that function is not being fulfilled. And so we're excited about this. We think it is hopefully the next big thing in currency development. So people will have dollars and Fracks, but the Fracks will just be money in an account. They won't actually have a physical token. Yeah.
When you said this would be about a year
before Fracks,
kicks in
and enters the market. I mean, there's huge amount of this is all computerized data, algorithms. I mean, it's incredibly complicated. The young guys at Fracks are the ones who are doing all that. I'm not nearly capable of the amazing amount of technology that goes into these kinds of new inventions. But we're living in a whole new world now where everything in 10 years, the world will be so different than today, whether it's the kind of cars you drive or, the driverless cars, or automation. It's changing, in a snap.
Where, Stephen, do you see it all going?
I think this will be incredibly, living standards around the world will rise because the era of robotics and the era of driverless cars and the era of 3D imaging, the kind of things that are going on right now, Larry, with genetic engineering and so on, we are at the cusp of finding cures to, whether it's multiple sclerosis, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, all these things. Maybe you and I won't live to see the day, but certainly in the next 25 or 30 years, these things are quite possible. So I get so frustrated when I hear young people say, "Oh my gosh, this is such a terrible time to be alive." I'm like, "Are you kidding? This is the greatest time ever to be alive."
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you, Larry.
Great seeing you.
You too.